is a leading expert in social health and author of The Art and Science of Connection: Why Social Health is the Missing Key to Living Longer, Healthier, and Happier. As a graduate of the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, sought-after advisor and keynote speaker, and founder of Social Health Labs, Casley has been improving global well-being through connection for over a decade. Her collaborations with organizations like Google, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the World Economic Forum contribute to building more socially healthy products, workplaces, and communities. Casley's insights can be found in outlets such as the New York Times, NPR, Scientific American, Psychology Today, and the Washington Post. And a little bit about Smiley. When companies want to increase workplace belonging, human connection, and team engagement, they call Adam Smiley Pozwalski. Smiley is an internationally renowned keynote speaker, workplace belonging expert, and best-selling author of 3 books that have been translated into multiple languages, including The Quarter Life Breakthrough and Friendship in the Age of Loneliness. Smiley shares industry-shaping insights and practical tools to attract and retain talent across generations, create a culture of belonging, and engage high-performing teams at world-class organizations like Apple, Google, Verizon, JP Morgan Chase, and the U.S. Navy. Smiley's TED Talk has been viewed 2 million times, and he has delivered 600 keynotes in front of 250,000 people in 25 countries. Smiley's work has been featured in 100 media outlets, including Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, the New York Times, the New Yorker, and the World Economic Forum. So welcome, Smiley and Casley. And actually, Smiley's workplace belonging kit made it into our previous session, which is a fantastic resource for all of you that you can access an actionable guide to create a culture of belonging, of human connection at work. It's very practical. So welcome all of you. Welcome Smiley and Casley. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Casley to get us started.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love seeing some people joining from my home country of Canada. That's always fun. I am based in California these days. However, all right. So we're all good with my screen. Everyone can hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to kick us all off by talking about social health, the missing key to flourishing at work and in life, and kind of set the stage for the conversation today, and then pass it over to Smiley. And I believe we'll have plenty of time for discussion afterward. So I'm actually going to skip over my background since Karen gave a very kind introduction, but I will say it's fun to be back, at least virtually, in the Harvard community. And I love the work that the Flourishing program has been doing. So thank you so much. So I want to start by inviting you to reflect on, what do you do to be healthy? Right? Let's say that you follow the advice of every doctor and every health blog and every wellness influencer, right? So what does that look like? What do we do to be healthy? Maybe you walk 10,000 steps a day. Maybe you get 8 hours of sleep. Maybe you eat lots of vegetables and fruits and nutritious foods. Maybe you go to therapy to help manage stress, right? Maybe you meditate and do different practices like that to help relax your mind. When we do these behaviors that we're told by doctors and health blogs and influencers to do, they improve our physical and mental health, right? That's what these are all about, but only up to a point. The problem with a lot of the traditional health advice that we hear in our day-to-day is that it overlooks one of the most important ingredients for our health, which is human connection. And the research is really clear on this, right? Decades of studies have shown that people who have meaningful relationships and a sense of community and meaningful connection in their lives live longer, they live healthier, and they live happier. And on the flip side of that, when people are isolated or lonely or disconnected in other ways, it takes a toll on their health, right? So people in that situation are 2 times more likely to develop depression. They have a 50% higher risk of dementia, a 32% higher risk of stroke, and a 29% higher risk of premature death. In fact, in some studies, it's as high as a 50% increased risk of premature mortality. So connection is really not just a nice to have, it's essential. Just like exercise and sleep and brushing our teeth and eating healthy foods, we need to make sure that a connection is a priority in our lives. Health is not just physical and mental like we typically hear and are told and are taught. Health is also social. We can't be fully healthy if we don't have a name to write down as an emergency contact, if we only see our friends or family, a few times a year, if we don't have those meaningful relationships with people who we can share experiences with and feel seen and heard in a deeper level. These connections are truly part of our health. So, in that vein, I want to introduce this idea of social health, which was first defined by Robert D. Russell in the 1970s, a wonderful researcher. I came across his paper back in 2013 when I was doing research for an app and a campaign that I was developing to take research insights on human connection and translate them into ways that people could develop more meaningful relationships. And I was blown away because it made such perfect sense, right? Expanding the language of physical and mental health to this idea of social health. But at that time, I could find very little information about it, right? There were research papers, there was some information online, but not a lot. It was hard to find anyone really talking about this. It wasn't part of the mainstream language. And I've spent over the last 10 years really working to advance this idea and help to understand it as a researcher, as a writer, as an advisor, as a founder. And the definition that I've landed on, kind of evolving and modernizing that original definition by Russell, is that social health is the dimension of our overall health and well-being that comes from connection. So, whereas physical health is really focused on the body and mental health is really focused on the mind, social health is about our relationships and our sense of community. And this is truly an essential pillar, right? So if you think about your overall health and well-being as kind of a Greek temple with different pillars that represent different aspects of our health and well-being, this social pillar is as important as the physical and mental pillars, right? We see that in the research and in the data. Physical and mental and social health go hand in hand, of course, right? These different pillars all work together to support that overall temple. But it's crucial to actually distinguish social health and think of it a little differently and use that language because it's so vital and because the actions that we take to strengthen it are going to be different, right? So, to improve our physical health, we might eat healthy foods and exercise regularly, like we talked about before. To improve our mental health, we might go to therapy or meditate or do other practices like that. To improve our social health, which in turn benefits our physical and mental health as well, we nurture meaningful relationships. We make new friends. We spend quality time with family. We join groups that we can be a part of where we get a sense of belonging. So to truly flourish and to live long, healthy, happy lives, we need all three. We can't just take care of the body and mind if we're not also taking care of our relationships. So, what I've seen in my work advocating for this topic over the years and also in the data is that this concept is starting to go mainstream. What you can see here are graphs. These are Google search trends of what is social health in the US and worldwide. And you can see quite clearly that in recent years, more and more people are searching for this idea and seeking out information to understand social health. So, this predominant narrative, which we currently have, which really focuses on physical and mental health and misses out on kind of social health as distinct yet interconnected, That's changing, right? It's starting to evolve. More and more people are seeing this difference. On one hand, there's still not a Wikipedia page about social health, but on the other, at the end of last year, the US Surgeon General talked about social health using that language for the first time. If you think about over the course of humanity, the way that we understand what it means to be healthy, and then the actions that we actually take to be healthy, they evolve over time, right? With advances in research, with policy, with changes in public awareness. If you think about not that long ago, we didn't realize that smoking caused lung cancer and was something really bad, and we had to change that through education, through policy, and so on, right? So the way we understand health changes over time. And I believe that, excuse me, in the same way that mental health has become a mainstream topic and something that, Gen Z is completely comfortable having conversations about, we're going to see that in the years and decades to come, social health becomes a mainstream idea in our society as well. And it is truly time for that social health movement. There are quite a few very worrisome trends here in the US, but also in countries around the world. One example of that is that we have fewer friends and we're spending less time with the friends that we do have. So you can see in this graph on the left that in 1990, 3% of Americans said that they have no close friends. In 2021, that jumped up to 12% of Americans saying they have no close friends. In contrast, back in 1990, 33%, so about a third of Americans said they have 10 or more close friends, not even counting relatives. But then in 2021, that fell down to 13% of Americans who have 10 or more close friends. In the graph on the right, you can see that the average amount of time that we spend actually interacting with our friends has decreased by an average of 20 hours per month in recent decades. So again, we have fewer friends and we're spending less time with the friends that we do have. Similarly, there are other trends showing that a lot of people are feeling really disconnected currently. Last year, the US Surgeon General issued an advisory about social isolation and loneliness as an epidemic. And we can see that around the world as well. So 20% of people globally don't have anyone they can count on for help. That was the finding in a Gallup study that came out in a couple years ago. Similarly, 1 in 4 people globally report that they feel lonely on a regular basis. And in the context of workplaces specifically, since that's what we're all here to talk about, 64% of people in the US report that they don't feel like they belong in their workplace. So you can see that a lot of people are feeling disconnected. But then another sign of poor social health is overconnection or unfulfilling connection, right? And so many of us spend so much time on social media or online, it can feel draining and like we're not connecting in meaningful ways, even if we're interacting on a regular basis. So in these different ways, we can see that we really urgently need to start improving people's social health and really make a change in our culture. One of the ways to do that is in the workplace, right? The workplace is a major opportunity for social health. On average, Americans spend more than 90,000 hours working over their lifetimes. And if you think about it, you might spend more time with your coworkers than you spend with your family and friends, right? It's easy to spend hours of your day working and not so much time with the people who actually matter most to us. If you have a team, that's a lot of time that you're spending with those individuals. If you don't have a team, that's a lot of time alone. So either way, your social health is being affected by your day-to-day work habits and rituals, right? Whether you feel connected or whether you feel lonely while working is going to have a long-term effect on your social health. So I invite us today in this conversation to kind of reimagine and reframe. What if you go into your job thinking of it not just as your source of income, but also as a potential source of social health, right? What kind of possibilities open up if we think about it that way? And similarly, if you go into the office in the morning or you log into Zoom in the afternoon, if we're looking at those opportunities as or through the lens of connection and community, right? As opportunities to get social interaction and potentially develop long-term meaningful friendships and relationships, what might that mean in our day-to-day lives? So, the good news is that we have an expert on exactly that question and how we actually go about taking that opportunity and seizing it, right? The statistic I shared on the previous slide, that 64% of people don't feel like they belong in the workplace, that indicates that we're not seizing this opportunity, right? There's more there that we can be doing so that our day-to-day work lives are meaningfully connected and that we're really making the most of that opportunity. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Smiley. I will say I have a book coming out on June 18 where I explore this theme specifically in the context of workplaces, but also in all aspects of our lives. This book I wrote to synthesize all the insights that I've learned in the past decade studying social health. It's meant really first and foremost as a toolkit for individuals to live more meaningfully connected lives, but it's also kind of a manifesto and a call to action for us collectively to start prioritizing this in our workplaces, in our healthcare system, in the technologies that we're designing, in our schools and our neighborhoods. So I invite you to stay connected, and I'm looking forward to talking much more over the course of this hour.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, go ahead, Karen, please.
No, I'm going to just turn it directly over to you, Smiley.
Well, thank you, Cassie. Cassie is a dear friend of mine. We've been friends for many years, and we're kind of in this community of people that write and speak about human connection. And it's just been amazing to see you share your work and build your work and the incredible work and advisory work that you're doing all over the world. So it's an honor to be on the journey with you. But thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Karen, for putting this together. I've long been a fan of kind of the work that Harvard's doing around human flourishing. Before I share my slides, I kind of just want to tell a story about kind of why this matters to me personally, why this topic matters. I really think that in the last 10 years of my work, I've been speaking and working with some of the largest, most influential organizations in the world. And I kind of, I've realized that whether it comes to attracting, retaining next-gen talent, navigating uncertainties in the future of work, or even just driving innovation and growth and succeeding as businesses and organizations, it really boils down to one thing. They build a culture of belonging. The people that do this well build a culture of belonging. And I think we throw that word belonging out all of the time. We don't necessarily know what it means, but we know how it feels. We know it when we experience it. We know it when we see it. We certainly know when it's missing, when it's not present in a room, when it's not present in a Zoom, when it's not present in a boardroom, when it's not present at a company. But I really kind of first learned about belonging way back over 25 years ago, first week of high school, freshman year. Exactly, Tamara. We feel it in its absence. But I learned about this 25 years ago, first week of high school, freshman year. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, actually. I went to Cambridge and Latin, very big public high school, over 2,000 kids. I wanted to play a sport my freshman year. And I know we're on a Zoom call and you can't see me that well, but like, I'm not that big of a dude. Trust me, football wasn't going to happen. Like, not going to happen. Soccer also not going to happen. Like, our soccer team's the best team in the state. So I went out for one of the only sports left, which was cross country. Now, I didn't know what the sport was. I assumed it was skiing, but it's actually running. You go run 3 miles or 5 miles or 10 miles on the weekends. So a couple of weeks into practice, we're doing a hill workout, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're just running up and down a hill over and over again. So I'm outside, kind of enjoying myself. It's New England, fall weather. I'm like, I'm getting exercise. This is great. My coach is this really hard-nosed Boston guy who just starts screaming at me. What the hell are you doing smiling, kid? Stop smiling. Stop puking, kid. Stop puking. Stop smiling. Stop puking, kid. Stop puking. So after that, the team nicknamed me Smiley. I was the slowest kid on the team. I never placed at any of our races, but I was like our cheerleader. I get us pumped up before every single race. I ended up running cross country and indoor outdoor track all 4 years, all 12 seasons. I became captain my senior year. I was still the slowest kid on the team, but I had a role to play. I mattered. I belonged. And I think at its very essence, at its very core, that's what belonging is. This sense that every single person on our team, regardless of how often they come in the office, regardless of whether they're working from a different country, from a different state, if they've been with us for 20 years, for 2 years, for 2 weeks, they matter, they belong, they feel this sense that they're part of something more than themselves, and that they're recognized for that, and that they're seen and heard. And I think the problem is that most people, they go to work every day and they come home from work every day. And to Cassidy's point, they do not feel this basic sense of belonging. And that is the work that we all have to do together. And Cassidy pointed to some of this data, but also just in terms of workplace engagement, 70% of Americans, according to Gallup, are disengaged at their jobs. 1/5 of those people are so disengaged, they're actively undermining their coworkers' work. So they're getting paid by the company or the organization they work for to screw things up for that company, which should be a concern to every leader or manager ever. But I really think it should be a concern to everyone, because it means that millions of people are waking up every day unhappy, unfulfilled, sometimes depressed, not their best self, not flourishing, not showing up fully for themselves, for their colleagues, for their coworkers, for their team, or most importantly, for their communities at large. And I think if the work that I do every day is really kind of helping organizations and companies specifically address this in the workplace. And what I see is a huge confluence of so many things that make belonging all the more important. So 4 major realities shaping the future of work right now, obviously AI, right? Which leads to overwhelm. Is AI going to take my job? Will I be replaced? What do I need to do to keep my job? What AI tools and skills do I need to learn? I don't have time to learn those skills. Oh my gosh. Which leads to a spiral. Loneliness, right? The loneliness epidemic, as Cassidy was talking about, we know this from the Surgeon General's report, 50% of Americans are lonely. This loneliness is spiking throughout the world, which leads to disconnection. Will I connect with my team? Will I have friends at work? Will I ever see anyone that I work with? Will I have a coach that supports me? All of these things. Will I belong? The mental health crisis and spiking rates of anxiety, especially among young people, but across the board, leading to more burnout at work. Does my workplace culture support mental health and well-being? Do we have a culture of psychological safety? And all of the kind of economic and trends and uncertainties affecting people's anxiety, layoffs that have been happening now for over a year, an aging and a shrinking workforce. Will we find someone for this job? Will we find someone skilled for this job? So I think all of these things kind of come together to create the landscape of the future of work right now, and really have an adverse impact on our young people, right? 50% of Gen Z now report excessive anxiety or worry. The social self has been impaired in half of young adults globally. This is how people are showing up at work. So what I see is kind of 4 major opportunities, all centered around kind of workplace belonging. Replacing AI overwhelm with human connection, replacing a focus on fully exponential growth with care. What is it like to have not just a growth mindset, but a care mindset? Replacing our obsession with productivity on well-being. I think if we have well-being at work, we actually get the things done that people are focusing on, and replacing culture fit and just kind of hiring for people that are going to fit in with hiring for culture transformation, and actually looking for people that are going to help us evolve and grow and make our culture more diverse, more dynamic, more innovative, and constantly be improving over time. The costs of the social health crisis that Cassie was talking about show up at work, right? So you all probably have seen this data, but lonely employees, more missed days at work, lower productivity, lower quality of work, higher risk of turnover. They cost their employers $154 billion per year. I've seen this stat go up to as much as $400 billion a year. It's enormous. This is data from Cigna. And belonging on the flip side kind of is this antidote, right? When people don't have to hide their true self at work, when they have a best friend at work. I'm sure you all have seen the data around having a best friend at work from Gallup, 7 times more engaged with your job. If you do not have a close friend at work or a best friend at work, there's only a 1 in 12 chance you'll be engaged at work. when technology is used to make meaningful connections, so not just to assign more work, but actually to help people learn and grow like we're doing now. Not just say like, hey, I need this filled out by 4 o'clock or fill out this spreadsheet, but we're actually using technology to connect. When we have shared goals with our colleagues, a sense of mission, a sense of vision, a purpose, as leaders, we set the strategy. People are on the ship together. We know our North Star. We know where we're headed. Simply picking up the phone and calling someone, oh my gosh, imagine that. Right? I could fire off this email to 12 people that's going to lead to a back and forth for 2 weeks. No one's actually going to get anything done. Half the people aren't going to read the email. Or I could just pick up the phone and call this person and probably be done with this in 2.5 minutes. And I think this idea of work-life separation, I think that we'll see in the coming years that the paradigm of work-life balance, which is impossible, by the way, is dead. And that actually young people, and frankly, everyone are kind of saying like, no, like, what about the work-life separation? Like, what does it mean to leave work at work? And as leaders, what does it mean to, when we're at the dinner table with our kids or children, be at the dinner table with our kids? Because if we are firing off emails and working, or when we're on vacation, if we are working and sending emails, what do you think our team is going to do when they're on vacation or when they're at the dinner table with their children? They're also going to be working. So I think you're going to see a lot more of like this conversation around work-life separation. So low levels of belonging at work, more stress, more burnout, more loneliness, more anxiety and depression. This is data from BetterUp. High levels of belonging, more resilience, better well-being, more personal growth, 92% more professional growth. And again, I really, with my clients, I'm trying to make kind of the business case for belonging. I actually truly believe that belonging should just be something we do because it's a core human need, right? Like we should just create belonging for people because that's how we are as a society. But that's not always how it is, especially in the corporate world. You kind of have to make a business case. You have to talk about the bottom line. But it's very clear that when employees have high levels of belonging at work, increase in their job performance, drop in turnover risk, reduction in sick days, 18 times more promotions, double the raises, 167% chance that you're going to recommend your job to someone else, which results in an annual savings of $52 million for a large firm. So I love this definition. There's no one definition of belonging, but I love this one. Diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. So I think a lot of times in the context of the workplace, I'll hear from people, oh, we have belonging. Like we went around the conference room, everyone said something. We went around the Zoom call, everyone had a chance to speak, or everyone could throw something in the chat. Or the most common, we did a survey. We did a survey. We did 2 surveys. We're good. We're good. We checked the box. Smiley, we did a survey. But belonging is really, was everyone's voice in the room listened to? Was everyone's feedback on the survey listened to? Did we follow up with the 1 or 2 or 4 comments that were like, ooh, that's a little bit hard to hear? Or that was some serious feedback there. That was some constructive feedback. Did we follow up with the people who were like, I never agree with this person. They're always wrong. That's the person we should be talking to. Did we say, tell me more? Let's continue the conversation. We can't change all the things on your list, but we can talk about those 2 or 3 or how we can approach them over the coming months. That creates that sense of psychological safety and belonging. So I love this definition. And this is data from Coqual Center for Talent Innovation. They published a great article in Harvard Business Review, which is linked here, and I can send it out in my resources, kind of narrowing belonging at work down to kind of 4 key areas: being seen for your unique contributions, being connected with your coworkers, being supported in your daily work and career development, and feeling proud of your organization's values and purpose. The more that we can get those to be enthusiastically high over time, and it's obviously going to change as things, day to day, the better off we're going to be in the higher levels of belonging that we're going to have. So I kind of want to just share a couple shifts and some just like little practical tips here. But I think the biggest thing that I'm really trying to work on is kind of making belonging something that everyone takes on. I think that usually a lot of the talk around belonging is like, yeah, that's HR's job. We have an HR director or chief of people or culture team, or if we have a DEI director, or someone working on diversity inclusion, like belonging, that's on them. I got my own my own stuff to worry about. Like I have a job, like, right? And I actually think that in the current paradigm of the future of work, especially in the shift to AI, which is only going to accelerate, is not going backwards, is only going to forwards, but belonging is everyone's job. Certainly every leader, every manager, everyone that has people working on their team, but I actually think every individual contributor, every employee, every intern, right? Belonging is their job too. Everyone has to show up at work with the mindset of how do I create more belonging for myself and for the people around me. And this is something that traditionally has just not been done at work. And one of the key things here, I think, is in the context of hybrid. So I think that a lot of times people assume that hybrid, which is the future of work, right? We're not going back to 5 days of work in the office. Some places, obviously, people need to be in person every day, but that the context in terms of knowledge work, it will be a hybrid future. But I think the kind of 1.0 level of that is, what's our hybrid policy? How many days a week? Is it 3 days? Is it 2 days? Is it 4 days? And I think the more important question is, are we connecting wherever we are? Because what's all too often happening is people are saying, look, you got to be in on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are in-person day, or you got to be in on Tuesdays. Everybody in the office on Tuesdays, which is great because that could be for connection, collaboration, innovation. But what happens is people leave the breakfast table early. They don't get that extra time with their kids. They go sit in traffic for 35 minutes. They show up at work. Their boss who called the meeting isn't even there. And then everyone else at their office is sitting in Zoom meetings all day long, all the while Zoom meetings or team meetings with noise canceling headphones on. Like, why did I just sit in traffic for 35 minutes? Why did I not have an extra half an hour with my daughter? Why was I not able to exercise this morning or eat and sit down and eat a healthy meal, right? So hybrid is where we connect. We have to design for human connection at the office, remote, and everywhere in between. That's what the future of work looks like. So shift number 2, from hustle, 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 hustle to human connection. I think we've seen where hustle culture has gotten us as a society. It's not a very pretty place, especially I think in big tech, but frankly across the board. I think we've broken a lot of things, and it's time to focus on human connection. So this is data that Cal Newport shared in his book, A World Without Email, which is a fantastic book. The average employee now switches between applications 1,100 times a day, sends and receives over 100 business emails per day, checks their inbox hundreds of times a day, checks email or Teams every 6 minutes. So I'm not sure how it's possible to get any real work done when this is the case. But more importantly, I'm not sure how it's possible to have time to actually connect with our colleagues, with our coworkers when this is the case. So like, this is what we're up against. Building time for human connection within the kind of paradigm of being distracted, overworked, overwhelmed, which is a challenge. Like, it's not easy. I think that that's the biggest thing with this stuff. It's like, Smiley, Casley, like, I understand it. Yeah, social health's important. We need to connect with our coworkers. We need to connect. I don't have time. Look at my wall-to-wall meetings. And so I think we need to say, yeah, you're correct. You are. Most people are overworked. But we have to build that human connection into the existing employee experience when we can. So some practical tips here, and then you can also check out some of the resources I'll share, which has a lot more stuff to check out. But whenever we are getting people together for an onboarding, for a training, especially when it's happening in person, but even virtually, the most important thing that must happen at these things is community building. These are invaluable opportunities for people to make a new friend. My friend Joanna Miller, she was running learning and development for Asana, which is a task management software company based in the Bay Area, consistently gets ranked one of the best places to work, best company culture in tech. They hired over 1,000 people virtually during the pandemic, which is incredibly difficult, a hard thing to do. And it's incredibly hard for anyone to start a new job virtually. But imagine for a young person, right? I'm thinking of it's someone's first, second job out of school, someone in their 20s, 25, 26, 28, and they've never been in an office. They've never shadowed a boss. They've never really seen how business is done. And they're starting a new job virtually. And Joanna was saying what people most got out of onboarding wasn't like, oh, here's how to do your job, or here's how to set up your email, or here's the 55 things you need to do to sign off for compliance. It was, did they make a new friend during onboarding? Could they turn to someone and be like, I don't really understand what's happening here. Me neither. Let's be friends. Or I don't really agree with what he's talking about. Me neither. Let's be friends. Like that was the purpose of onboarding. So whenever we're doing onboardings or trainings or offsites or a manager meeting, those are all about community building. Yes, the content matters, but we can deliver the slides later. We can deliver the PDF later. That has to be about community building, not always talking about work. So giving that 1 minute, that 5 minutes for people to have those check-ins, right? For personal check-ins. Now, some people will say, well, Smiley, I don't want to share. I don't want to bring my personal life into work. Like that, like I'm here to work. Like I have my therapist to talk to, or I talk to my spouse or my kids. Like I'm here to work. Cool. You can just say skip or pass. But what you don't get to do is create a culture where nobody gets to share, because the chances are that quite a higher number of people want to be able to share those personal things. And the data shows that when we do bring the personal into work and we're more vulnerable and we share stories and we connect as human beings, we actually do better work. So trying one new thing every meeting, whatever it is, whether it's a prompt, whether it's switching up facilitators, just changing things up slightly is going to help people be more focused, help people be more excited. I think we often assume that the same person has to lead every meeting, usually the person with the most seniority. I think that that's incorrect. It's more inclusive, more dynamic, more interesting when we actually spice it up a little bit. Thrive interviews. I'll share a link to an article I wrote on LinkedIn about Thrive interviews. But this is kind of building off of Adam Grant's work, who talks about stay interviews, right? This idea of pushing back on the exit interview, right? The exit interview is someone's last day, them telling you everything that they hate about their job. It's like, this would have been helpful information, 6 months ago. And a stay interview is like, what would make you want to stay? But I'm trying to let's go one step further. What does it look like for you to thrive here? What do you need to do your best work? In terms of your schedule, in terms of are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Do you prefer working by yourself with one or two other people in a larger team? Do you need to be in person more? Do you need to be remote more? Are Tuesdays at 2:00 very hard because you have to pick up your kid from childcare, or you don't have childcare? Whatever it is, knowing what those things are, and not that we can say yes to every single person's request. It's that we're having the conversation and we know what makes our coworkers and ourselves thrive. And doing that, I think, like builds a sense of belonging, even just having the conversation. Small win parties, sharing mistakes and sharing doubts. I think you all know this from the work around flourishing, but there's a lot of work about the power of savoring, right? As a path to flourishing. We often wait and defer to these like large accomplishments, or like we hit our annual goal, or it's someone's last day, let's have a big retirement party for them, or we hit this massive target. Like celebrating those little things, those little steps along the way, that's really, really important. And then creating that space for people to talk about their mistakes, their doubts. There's a lot of research that Amy Edmondson has done around psychological safety about how important it is to share our mistakes, share our doubts, as a path for showing how important it is to take risks and be vulnerable as leaders. So those are some of the things I just wanted to share, and then I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. But really, kind of what I want to leave you with is creating a culture where people can really make the ask, really put themselves out there, go outside their comfort zone, ask for what they need. And we can't say yes all of the time, but maybe some of the time, or two to the three things that people are asking for out of the 10, we can say, yeah, let's work on that. Or we can't address that now, but we can in a few months. But we create that conversation. That's really what I think is really important at work. So this QR code will take you to a link where you can get this toolkit. It's really beautiful. It's like designed, it's colorful, trying to help people kind of continue to do the tactical work. There's also some links there to some articles and podcasts and stuff that I recommend checking out. So please feel free, and please connect on LinkedIn as well. And I'll stop sharing here. And I think we have some good time for Q&A, Karen.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know we've got a number of other kind of thought leaders and experts in this space in the audience. So hoping people will come forward with comments, questions, or insights. So just to kind of get us started, I would love to hear from both of you. If you have any thoughts about design for human connection or practices or interventions, and what are your thoughts about the differences between approaching the pain of loneliness in the workplace? So that's kind of like the deficit model, but the interventions might be different. So how do we approach the pain, yet also try and find ways to address like getting people to that state of flourishing, or the plus 10, or kind of focusing more on social fitness? I know, Kasley, you've used that term, which I love because I love the term psychological fitness. So it's not only stopping the bleeding, solving the pain, but also that promotion. So are the interventions different? Are the designs different? How would you differentiate?
Karen, I love this question. Can I jump in first, Smiley? Yeah, I mean, I started my career studying positive psychology. I did research at the University of Pennsylvania in their positive psychology center. And that has had a huge influence on how I think about this because, and I'm sure everyone here is familiar, but just to kind of summarize, the whole idea was, okay, we know, quote unquote, what's going wrong with people and how to fix that. We focus so much on mental illness in the field of psychology. What about what goes right with people, right? How do we promote more of what's good? Because a lot of times we see that, you give someone a medication for depression and they stop feeling depressed, but that doesn't mean they're flourishing, right? That doesn't mean they're happy or fulfilled or healthy in other ways. And that lens is exactly what I've applied in my work to this, to the problem of loneliness, right? If we focus on fixing loneliness, which is important to do, right? And has been a lot of what my work has focused on with different partners in communities, in companies. We need to do that because a lot of people are truly suffering, right? And a lot of people experience chronic isolation and loneliness and are in a state of true suffering. And so you're right, Karen, that we need those solutions that are tailored in that situation. However, we also need to broaden and look at the other half, which is social health is relevant to us all, right? If you wait until you have a panic attack to start taking care of your mental health, that's not helpful. If you wait until you have a cancer diagnosis to start taking care of your physical health, that's not helpful. We all need to be strengthening our social muscles in advance of needing them, right? We need to invest in our social health so that it's an asset and a resource that we can draw from to prevent loneliness in the first place. But also because there are benefits beyond that, right? It helps us live healthier and happier. It helps us to flourish. So I think, and I write about this quite a bit in the book. In fact, Karen, you're going to love it. Because that shift, that framing from just focusing on addressing the negative to creating more of the positive, from the deficit to the asset, it helps generate new ideas, right? And that's what we saw with positive psychology, is that just that simple kind of mindset shift opened up all these new ways that we could help people and have meaningful impact in people's lives. And we need to do the same with this conversation around the loneliness epidemic, right? It's not just about loneliness. Many of us don't feel lonely, and yet we're not socially healthy in all the ways. Maybe we have good friends, but we want to take those connections deeper. Maybe we have one-on-one relationships, but we're not part of any groups or communities that confer different benefits, right? It's so multidimensional to be socially healthy. And so all of us can benefit from strengthening our social muscles.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. So I love the work that you guys are doing. So my question really is around what successful models have you seen to engage leadership in prioritizing connections and social health in the workspace? When I work with leaders and try to convince them about everything that we're saying, it comes up against, well, workers are working at half mast anyway at this point. They're not fully committing, the quiet quitting and all of the things. And so for us to then, intentionally focus on it, and of course you can say, well, we want to get ahead of it, like all of the, everything that you're saying are the words that come out of my mouth. Have you seen any successful models, and what do you recommend for getting leaders to jump on board?
Great question, Julie. I think, first of all, I don't think that there's a one size fits all model. Like, I think that one of like the big things that I try to kind of impart on my audience is that I think that for so long we've been looking for like the fix across the board. And one of the things that like the future of work, especially with the shift to hybrid post-pandemic, has really taught us is that what works for this organization might not work for this organization. What works for this team at this organization might not work for this team. What works for this leader might not work for this leader, which is a different way of how we've approached leadership. It used to be like, this is a book. It was a New York Times bestseller. It'll work for you. It may not, right? And so I think that that's like an important kind of just mindset shift. But also what I've seen work is two things. Interactive experiences where leaders can see their people like light up inside when they have this time for connection. And by interactive experiences, I mean kind of transformational dynamic experiences. I have a couple like referenced in the book, but like, for example, my friend does this thing called late night art. And it is a experience around he plays music, and these tables are covered with construction paper and colored pencils and watercolors, and people are going around having conversations about just themselves. And by the end of it, they're all opened up, they're connected, and then like they do this prompt of like, what's something that you want to achieve at work that you haven't been able to, and people give ideas to each other. If a leader, if a CEO is sitting there and sees that their people alive, opened up, like they're bought in, like they have to see it. And I think they have to see that impact rather than just kind of read like, oh, 42% are going to be more connected. Like I usually show some of the retention data, and that kind of gets them lit up. But when they actually experience it themselves, I really think that we're moving into this into a space where like kind of that transformative, interactive, dynamic learning experience, when they see their teams, oh, I've never seen my team lit up this way, right? And especially when they can take that and then compare it to engagement data, right? I think the other piece of this is measuring. So now almost most top organizations are using, there's so many tools, right? Whether it's like Culture Amp or Workday, Reflective, Glint, to manage employee engagement over time and do pulse surveys. But you can see that a team is super disengaged, or everyone on one team is, and then they do these kind of activities and things spike. That's been, in my experience, the most effective way, is like actually the leader is in the room when this stuff is happening.
That reinforces the idea that direct experience and observation is the most persuasive and compelling, rather than maybe what the ROI figure is. Thank you so much. That was really insightful. So I know we've got Kimberly, Des, and Kat all have questions. Kimberly, let's start.
Hi, thanks. You mentioned positive psychology, Kathleen, and I started my teaching career in positive psychology too. And one of the things that I came up on quite frequently, to my dismay, was that oftentimes the more people heard about the things they should be doing to feel better, the worse they felt because it was unattainable for them. And I'm wondering how you address this, or maybe how explicitly you present these concepts when we're actually talking about the practical application in a workplace. And is this a challenge that you see? And have you any recommendations to overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question. I focus on it less in the context of the workplace and more in the context of everyday lives, because what I hear from people is, there's a reason I haven't seen my friends in 6 months. It's because I'm really busy and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm taking care of my kids, and I'm trying to pay the bills, and maybe I'm caregiving for a family member, and I'm stressed out and sleep deprived, and it's just, I can't prioritize social health. And so one of the chapters in my book is about how we can take small steps that have a big impact. And the research shows that small steps to connect in little ways do have measurable impact, right? Like sending a text to a friend out of the blue has a measurable impact on people's levels of loneliness, right? And it's such a small thing. Is that going to cure it? No. Is that the end all be all? No. And so that's why it's a nuanced conversation about how we create a a different lifestyle, but also a different culture where social health can more easily be all of our experience. But a lot of what I write about is really focused on what are the practical, tangible things each of us can do in our day-to-day lives, no matter how busy and overwhelmed we feel. And I think applying that to the workplace is also very relevant. Like, right? Like, one simple thing we can all do is set a reminder on our calendars on Fridays to spend 5 minutes sending a note of gratitude to one of our coworkers, right? Every Friday at 10 a.m., think about one person you work with who you appreciate and send them an email or give them a call if you have more time, right? Or literally spend 1 minute on it. Those are the kinds of small things that are going to benefit our relationships in the workplace in the long term and that are feasible, right? And so obviously we want the broader structural changes and all of this, but we can each start small and be empowered, even if we're not in leadership positions and even if we are super busy.
Desiree, do you want to go?
Sure. I wanted to see if there was anything else. I, by the way, completely agree with you, Kathleen. High impact leaders do connect in these moments where they don't need anything at all from the person, you know, and in these casual ways, and that just deepens connections and relationships, and it amps up loyalty like unbelievably. So my partner Jill is on the call too. So she and I, very similar to your Asana story, Smiley, hyperscaled Headspace. Y'all may be familiar with the organization and are so well familiar with everything that you reported out, Smiley. I wanted to loop back to a previous question, and this may be a very unpopular perspective, but how do you convince the powers that be to spend time and financial resources on these topics like building belonging, connection in the workplace? And in the end, and this is the stark reality of corporate America, it is CEOs and CFOs that greenlight any such efforts and fund them as well. And the truth is that unless you quantify why it is important, it is not compelling to them to greenlight them. And so, and Smiley, you touched on this, data, honestly, is king. It provides us the freedom to do the real high impact work in our organizations. And then I think the data paves the pathway to direct experience, which is what you were talking about, Karen. And there is no one algorithm, or at least that's what we've learned. Every company is different. You emphasize that, Smiley. Thank you for doing that. And we have to find the data within our businesses and be really creative about it. You know, it's onboarding feedback, exit interviews. Yes. It is those employee surveys. It is things that managers hear in one-on-ones. It is listening sessions. It is one super important one that we found at Headspace was stay close to our ERGs and our ERG leaders. There's a wealth of information there that can help us redirect and pivot and gather it. And so I just wanted to add that to the narrative, but I wholeheartedly agree with you, Smiley. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a great point, and I think it was Julie's point before. It's like we have both. We have all, like, come with the data. The data didn't work. Sit in this chair and sit for this experience for an hour and see what happens. That didn't work. Let's try something else. Like, that's our role, I think, as facilitators, as teachers, as coaches, as academics, as speakers, as practitioners. We have to find. I'll use whatever inroad I can. What I care about is the outcome, and I know all of you do too. Like, we are trying to create belonging at work. We are trying to create belonging in society. We're trying to eradicate loneliness. We're trying to create human flourishing. Whatever, we need to figure out whatever way in we can. And we also need to be able to course correct when the way in we're trying isn't working. Right? Because people are going to say, well, yeah, I guess belonging increases engagement, decreases turnover, but I have to lay off this many people and I have to report, we've got budget cuts coming up and blah, blah, I have other priorities. Okay, well, let me make a different case, right? So I think that that's our role. And I'm always on the lookout for like concrete examples of companies where they can point to the delta of increased belonging levels based on behavior and what they're doing, which leads to increased retention, which leads to increased profit, all these things, because I think that kind of data is essential.
Well, and just like you said before, Smiley, that there is no one size fits all solution, but that's why having conversations like this and having the space to discuss and learn from each other and understand what's working and what's not working is important. And it's a verb, it's an iterative state. There isn't a company that solves for this and then they've arrived. Kat, did you have a question? I know we're getting close to the hour.
It was less of a question and more of a comment, very much like what Desiree was saying around the data speaking. And the thing I wanted to add is it's very much the self-awareness building, because what I work with a lot of tech companies, and a lot of people working in tech companies are like, we don't need human connection. We're getting the job done. We're efficient. And they're not even aware of what's missing for them. And so when I facilitate sessions, I split up the group into people who focus on the it, which is the outcome, or the we, which is the connection, or the I, which is what am I getting out of this job? And it's like a human graph when people gravitate to the different spaces, because they see how many of them are focusing on an it versus how many of them are focusing on the we versus how few focus on the I, surprisingly. And that creates that light bulb moment that Smiley was talking about of, oh my God, all my focus is here. And then we have this discussion around what's the cost, what's the benefit for each one of these areas of focus. And that creates that buy-in for why we should focus a little bit more on belonging, why we should focus more on building trust and developing relationships, because that day comes where I need to call someone, I have an emergency, and there's nobody who's willing to answer the phone because I haven't put in that time with them. So, very much what Smiley was saying about this light bulb moment has to go on for them before they're able to take those actions that you were talking about, Cassie, to take the time to write a gratitude, or to take 30 seconds in the beginning of the meeting and just genuinely listen to somebody's response to a how are you, rather than just making it perfunctory, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you, Kat. Yeah, I find it very helpful and hopeful to hear examples also of how those transformational elevated moments of connection, or when people light up, that can happen virtually as well. Some of those examples are in Smiley's toolkit. So Smiley and Caslie, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks all of you for being here. I will send out a recording, and I'll send out Smiley and Caslie's information, and check out their books, check out their materials. Caslie, I think does your book come out in June?
1 month.
So we can,
yeah, but it's available.
order.
It's available for order now. Yes. Yeah.
All right, we'll do it. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Have a great day,
Thank you
everyone.
all. It was
Thank
great to meet
you all for being
all.
here. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Bye.